In this video, we're going to be now finding the area of triangles. So our only essential question is, how do you find the area of a triangle? We've already discussed the area of a quadrilateral. So how do you find the area of a triangle? A triangle is half of a parallelogram. So the formula is going to come from the formula for the area of a quadrilateral, which was base times height. Since a triangle is half of a quadrilateral, we just put the half in our formula. So we have 1/2 of the base times height. Or if you can't use fractions, it's base times height divided by 2. We're just going to cut it in half. So you can see here in our last video, we had this rectangle and the area was base times height. Now a triangle would be half of that. So we would take base times height and then cut that in half. And then the same thing here for this parallelogram. We would have base times height to find the area of this entire parallelogram. And then this triangle would be half of that. So we would take base times height and divide it by 2, or 1/2 of the base times height. So here are some triangles, and let's find their areas. So the critical thing when finding the area of a triangle is to identify the base and the height. Now the base and the height will always be perpendicular to each other. Okay, the base and the height will always be perpendicular to each other. So we're always kind of looking for this 90-degree angle to identify the base and the height, because the base is not always at the bottom and the height is not always up and down. So it's critical that we identify the base and the height correctly, especially when we're given more measurements than we need. So here in this triangle, we have 3 sides given, but only 2 of them are the base and the height. So this right angle right here tells me that these 2 sides are perpendicular to each other. So these are going to be my base and my height. So the 4 centimeters and the 5 centimeters are the base and the height. So the area of this triangle will be 1/2 of the base times the height. So area is going to be 1/2 of 4 times 5. 1/2 of 4 times 5. And that's going to be 10 centimeters squared. So the area of this triangle is 10 square centimeters, or 10 centimeters squared. This next triangle, we have all kinds of measurements given, but again, I'm looking for the 2 things that are perpendicular to each other, or that form that 90-degree angle. And here's that 90-degree angle. So this side right here and this measurement right here are my base and my height, since they are perpendicular to each other. So this is my base, and this is the height of my triangle. So essentially these 2 sides are useless when it comes to finding the area. I don't need to know those. I'm only focused on my base and my height right here. So now I can use my formula. Area equals 1/2 base times height. So that's going to be 1/2 of 15.4 times 8, and 1/2 of 15.4 times 8. The area is 61.6 feet squared, or 61.6 square feet. So again, pretty simple once you identify what the base and what the height is. So here are a couple more triangles that usually give students trouble. So again, we're tempted to call the 10 meters in this case the base, since it's on the bottom. We always like to call this bottom segment the base, but really we're looking for that 90-degree angle, which is right here. So this segment, or this distance, and this side of the triangle are perpendicular to each other. So in actuality, in this triangle, this is the base and this is the height. Okay, so it's just kind of rotated. So if you could imagine just flipping it around, so the 14 meters is on the bottom, this would be the height and this would be the base. So that is our base and height. So we have 1/2 of 14 times 6, and 1/2 of 14 times 6 will be 42. Half of 14 is 7. 7 times 6 is 42. Yeah, 42 square meters, or meters squared. Okay, so these 2 sides are irrelevant. They had nothing to do with finding the area of this triangle. And then sometimes you'll see a diagram like this last one, where again we have a perpendicular distance here. So this 3 yards is my height, I know that. And then you see this dotted line right here is kind of extending the base. This is actually the base right here, this distance, this 4.5 yards. But here the height is measured outside of the triangle instead of inside the triangle, like the one on the left. So that's all this line extension here is. So this distance right here is irrelevant. It's just showing that it's extending the length, or the where this base is to show you that this and the base are perpendicular to each other. So this kind of looks like an odd diagram, but this is my base and this is my height, since those two are perpendicular to each other if I extended one of those sides. So here the height is measured outside of the triangle, since this kind of juts out over here on the left. So again, 1/2 base times height gives me 1/2 times 4.5 times 3. And when I do that calculation, I get 6.75 square yards. And there's the area of my triangle. So very similar to finding the area of quadrilaterals, but now we've got the half in there. So that's something that's easily overlooked or forgotten. Always remember the half or divide by 2, whichever one you're more comfortable with. Find half of the base times height. That's the number one mistake. The number two mistake is not identifying the base and the height correctly. Always look for those perpendicular sides.